Good afternoon to all. I welcome you to the session EU-Africa Partnership, a new start. Let me first thank my colleague at CEPS for the great organization of this version of the 2021 virtual edition of the EIDEAS-Lab, and also the Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association, one of the co-sponsors of the EIDEAS-Lab this year, for their support in the co-organization of this session. At EMEA, the Euro-Mediterranean and Africa Partnership and Integration, so regional integration, is one of the key policy research initiatives that we are pleased to collaborate with CEPS via the Trigger project and also the Euro-Mediterranean Network for Economic Studies that we have developed over the past 5 years, and other initiatives that we are together working on. I would like to start this panel discussion with a brief introduction to put this discussion within a context where we are today. First of all, let's not forget that the EU-Africa partnership dates back to decades. And I would like to emphasize a few milestones dates. Starting with 2007, these are many years ago, at the EU-Africa summit in Lisbon, both continents declared their willingness to move beyond a donor-recipient relationship. This is key in the partnership. Of course, here the EU and the African Union jointly identified together mutual and complementary interests, and to move away from this traditional relationship toward a real partnership based on equality, mutual understanding, and recognition, and also encouraging a full inclusion of migrant communities and diaspora. So this is really was in 2007, and I think this is a key, at least, commitment. As a result of that joint Africa-EU strategy, an action plan was launched, and since 2008. And implemented for some successive periods of 2 years up to 2018. So these are really what I call the implementation of this partnership since then. Now, after 10 years since the adoption of this first joint Africa-EU strategy in Lisbon, the 5th African Union EU Summit in 2018 in Abidjan focused on investing in youth for sustainable future. This is all the history, in fact, before the COVID-19, shock that we have gone through, or we are still going through. Now, the joint declaration back then in 2018 emphasized the importance to reinforce a mutually beneficial partnership, African Union and EU, and also the trilateral cooperation between the African Union, the European Union, and the United Nations. So of course, there were some strategic priorities, and I want to state them there. It's investing in people, education, science, technology, and skills development. This is essential for development. Strengthening resilience, peace, security, governance, migration, mobility, and very importantly, mobilizing investment for African structural sustainable transformation. So this was in 2018. Of course, everything went completely changed at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. That was, of course, in March 2020. Now, in March 2020, the President of the European Commission and the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy announced a proposal for a new comprehensive strategy with Africa. So going beyond, building on a partnership on 5 key areas: green transition and energy access, digital transformation, sustainable growth and jobs, peace and governance, migration, mobility. Also, I would like to emphasize and point that the EU recognized the importance of strengthening the political, cultural, and economic ties between the 2 continents in a multipolar world. So this is a clear recognition that there are other actors who are also, in a way, competing in Africa and also for their own interests. This will give more leverage, of course, to both continents, EU and African Union, at the international scene. Now, after this, just a few months ago in February, the EU published a joint communication on a renewed partnership with the Southern Neighborhood, proposing the new agenda for Mediterranean to relaunch the cooperation and realize the untapped potential of the region after recognized failure of the Barcelona process. Now, the agenda proposed 5 main areas of action: human development, good governance and rule of law, strengthening resilience, building prosperity, and also seizing the opportunities in the digital transition, peace, security, migration, mobility, and green transition, climate resilience, energy, and environment. Now, the new agenda stresses also the importance to increase cooperation between North and Sub-Saharan Africa as a triangular cooperation with the European Union. In April 2021, the new Cotonou Partnership Agreement maintained a common foundation setting based on 6 strategic priorities, again, within the same overall thinking of human rights, democracy, governance, peace and security, human and social development, environmental sustainability and climate change, inclusive and sustainable economic growth and development, migration and mobility. So generally, all those, I would say, strategic objectives are aligned. Now, to achieve these very ambitious objectives, and of course, ambitious more on the implementation side of the European Union and its partners, the multi-annual financial framework for 2027 was approved in December 2020, merges most of the existing instruments, there were a lot, into one single big instrument called the Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, so well known as NDC. So this framework allocates for Sub-Saharan Africa and also the neighborhood under this NDC more around, I would say, 50 billion euros over this period of time. During the COVID-19, we've seen a lot of developments over this year. And one key development is the emphasizing the role of the private sector for financing development, which in fact has been pushed by the international community, for example, in the whole debate that you all are aware of on the debt relief. So, of course, having the private sector contributing to the blending and of the instrument and contributing to the financial effort of the European Union in this sense. Now, the European Union has already a very vast experience in blending facilities since actually 2007 with the EU Africa Infrastructure Trust Fund, also the Neighborhood Investment Facility, and most recently, in 2016, there has been this EU platform for blending in external cooperation. No, that was before 2016. In 2016, you had the external investment plan, particularly encouraging the investment in Africa and EU neighborhood. Now, all of this is there. I mean, it's working in certain manners, and I think we can listen more to our panelists today talking about it and see how in practice, how it works. So there are also other instruments which, in fact, are based on this European Fund for Sustainable Development, which is now moving into under the MMF, which is the multi-financial framework, which is the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, and also would be one of the main instruments of EU cooperation with partners countries. So it is clear that today we are experiencing a lot of changes, not only from a, I would say, transition point of view, digital transition, green transition, and also can also see some changes within the EU institutional setting, which also reflects very much the new geopolitical commission emphasis on the role of international partnership for building a stronger EU role in the global fight for poverty and the SDGs promotion. So looking at this challenging context as well of the added by the COVID-19, you can see that the southern neighborhood and also the Africa has been very weakly prepared for facing the pandemic, and also this hampers their capability or capacity to have a resilient path for growth and development going forward. So there are many questions, in fact, that could be posed in this new context or challenging context that we are living in. One is, are we moving toward a completely new financing development policy of the EU in the continent? Is it going to be based on this type of guarantees, blending instrument, and who will be the partners, in fact, in the target countries, and who will be monitoring those new developments? Now, of course, Africa is not one homogeneous group. Africa has different types of countries, and there are the African lower income countries and fragile states that they need much more for development, and most probably might not be yet ready for this new change of the approach to the continent. And also we can, based on what I shared with you, is that there are many frameworks, and of course they are targeted, but probably need some more coordination between the institutions themselves, with all the institutions that are dealing with EU in the continent. So, and also in terms of the international cooperation. So these are some of the questions we can discuss during the panel. So let me start and to warmly welcome our panelists today. Start with Sandra Kramer. She's the director of the EU African Union Relationship, West and East Africa, at the International Partnership Directorate General at the European Commission. Maria Shaw-Barragan, who is the director of the department in the European Investment Bank that deals with all the lending operations in Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, Asia, and Latin America. And the EIB, as you all know, is the Bank of the European Union, and its main mission is lending activity outside the EU, and also support EU policies and priorities for the external action. And third, Christian Kopf, who is the head of fixed income at the Union Investment Group, leading a German asset manager. Christian, he's also a member of the advisory group at the ECB, Bond Market Contact Group, and EIB, the Chief Economist Advisor Group, and also a member of the Asset Management and Investment Council Executive Committee. So he has worked a lot on, for example, GDP-linked sovereign bonds, and then he did a lot of other work also, among others, with the Center for European Policy Studies, CEPS. So I would like to start and kick off this discussion with Sandra. So Sandra, please tell us what INPA is doing now and how you operationalize your activities in the Africa region. Thank you.
Thank you, Rym. Can I just ask you, can you hear me?
Very well.
All right, good, because we had some technical difficulties, but thank you very, very much. Rym, good to see you. Maria, good to see you. And a lot of old friends also online, Constance and Karel, and of course, Sam, Bilal. I haven't seen you for ages, all of you, but it's very good to be connected. So really welcome everyone. If there are connection problems, please signal it to me somehow, because I will turn off my camera. So thanks for organizing. Look, we have a good panel. We don't have the African side. We have already discussed that. It's a pity, because if you want to have an equal partnership, which is what we want, we need to have, of course, all sides. We will, of course, always keep that in mind. Now, my title, this is also a new start, and you're title of the panel is New Start, is now Director Africa, because we've actually merged the two Africa directors into one. And I'm now lucky to be responsible for all Sub-Saharan Africa. So again, many, many thanks. And this is in many ways indeed a new start, Rym. This geopolitical commission under the chair of Ursula von der Leyen came into office, declared itself a geopolitical commission, and really started well by also declaring Africa as a strategic priority, as you know. And her very first trip abroad outside the European Union was to the Africa Union in Addis Ababa. And that was 4 days after she took office. So she really put that immediately into action. She also renamed the portfolio of my commissioner, Jutta Urpilainen, as Commissioner for International Partnerships. And that is a new start in itself. And the mission letter to Jutta Urpilainen, she asks, can you look at the European model for development? Can you see that you make it more strategic, more value added, more effective, and also more in line with the European policy priorities? Now, with that, and also seeing a world which is increasingly complex and where there are indeed increasingly competing models, as you already referred to, Rym, there is definitely the need for Europe to be more assertive in this world. We are always, for Sub-Saharan Africa, but across Asia and Latin America as well, the largest or one of the largest trading partners, foreign direct investment partners, development partners, and humanitarian aid partners. We need to see within the European Union altogether what it is that we stand for and what it is that we stand up for. And I think there's 3 things here. First of all, we stand for the values of the European Union, and that underpins everything we do. Democracy, rule of law, human rights. That is what we stand for and stand up for. Secondly, very importantly, and I think it's a unique selling point we have vis-à-vis other competing models as well, it's sustainability in everything we do. Be it social, be it environmental or economic or financial or political, what we do is sustainable. It's not piling debt upon debt. We will look at environmental consequences, and we will look at the issue of decent jobs for the people where we work in the partner countries. So I think that is something that makes us stand out. And in that sense, this is a very big difference. Of course, the compass for all this, number 3, is the Sustainable Development Goals. This will lead us in what we do. We looked at how to translate this into DG International Partnerships. And obviously, this is more than a name change. This is a real shift, a new start of a very different relationship. You have already looked at the donor recipient, you mentioned it. We have rigorously moved away from that. That was done, equal partnerships with responsibilities on both sides of the equations, that we know. But what we have done now is to say, in DG International Partnerships and the way we work, policy first, i.e. we're not going to be led by money, but led by choices of policy, green transition, responsible digitalization, the creation of jobs, education, vocational training. All this is what leads us, and that lines up with the policy priorities of this European Commission. Secondly is geographization, and you can see it in Ndiki, which by the way is a strange name, and we all know that, but it is now called Global Europe as well, because the European Parliament helped everyone, in my view, by giving it a much better name. So it's called Global Europe, and I think that's much better. So geographization, if you look at how Ndiki is structured, Global Europe, it is that most of the funding is geographized, i.e. it lands in a country or in a region. Now that's number 2, how we changed INTPA. Number 3 is the way we work, a co-creating way of working. It's not as if Africa, of which I'm very lucky to be the director, is doing this on its own in a bubble. And I see a lot of Maria, and I'm happy with that. But what I would also like to do is to see my colleagues within the Commission who deal with agriculture or transport or energy or digital. So the whole of Commission approach is extremely important. And what's equally important is the member states. And you know about our Team Europe approach, how we really move hand in hand and how we bring Team Europe initiatives to our partnerships, where we focus on particular themes and where all member states come together as a big puzzle to make a transformational impact on one or two particular things in a country, rather than spending a lot of money on unconnected, unfocused projects that do not make the change most of the time. So this new way of co-creation is a new start. Now, it's a good timing because this is still a relatively new commission. It's also a new budgetary cycle, as you mentioned, 2021 to 2027. And it is time for a global recovery, which is going to have to be green and just and digital, and which affects really all of us. And I think that we have the right ways to go about it. We have also a new US administration, which I think should be mentioned as hopefully a positive factor in all this. Now, on Global Europe, you have seen what that instrument is. And by the way, next week it will be adopted officially by the European Parliament, European Council. So next week you will see a press release and all that, just to celebrate and to mark the moment that finally, after all these negotiations, Global Europe is a fact. It's much simplified. It is streamlined because it takes 8, 9, 10 budget lines and puts it into one. It also is not making a distinction between Sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa, which was the case in the past and which was really a bureaucratic hindrance of our work. It's very responsive because it has a rapid reaction pillar, but it also has a cushion where we can tap out of in case of need. And, you know, there was lots of discussions whether that was too big, etc. But it's the global pandemic that woke everyone up. No one saw it coming, and we needed it very much. So there's also more, of course, transparency and democratic scrutiny, because it is no longer outside of the budget like the European Development Fund was. It is fair and square within the budget. So programming of all that is ongoing as we speak, nationally, regionally, and looking at these policy priorities and looking what it is that we want to do in these countries. And obviously, you're focusing a lot on the blending and the guarantees, which we will do under, under the EFSD+. And I will not dwell too much. I know Maria and Christian will probably come into that as well. But I think there are two important things that we need to focus on now. One is the global recovery. For that, we need, first of all, debt relief. And the European Commission has done it very much, including the member states, to make that possible and to give that fiscal space to governments in our partner countries. Two are the concessional loans, the blending, which is very, very important, and where we work hand in hand with the EIB and many other institutes and organizations to make that happen. Three is the private sector, because Rym, we can, you know, our ODA money is not going to make the difference. It's not. It's less than what comes in as remittances. It's much less than what comes in on foreign direct investment. If we want to make a change for a more peaceful and prosperous world, we need the private sector to come in. So I'm looking forward to Christian to come into that. There's also domestic resource mobilization. We need to collect better taxes and we need to spend it better. And that is something that we focus on as well, with programs on public finance management, etc., to make sure that that happens. So that's the global recovery. The second point that we really need to focus on is vaccines. Because, you know, we're all thinking, we're nearly there, light at the end of the tunnel, we're going to have a nice summer. The thing is that it's not enough. We have done a lot through COVAX. The EU and the member states have 2.5 trillion funded into COVAX. And as President von der Leyen said during the Global Health Summit, we produce a lot of vaccines in the European Union. 50% we export, we give away, we donate. So we are, she called it the pharmacy of the world, but really, really important that we mark that. Of course, we have set the vaccine sharing mechanism, and we're looking at manufacturing and hoping that, as President von der Leyen announced, we can come to manufacturing in Sub-Saharan Africa. That's not for now, of course not, but it will be for the next pandemic. So As a conclusion, Rym, because I have been speaking too long already, this is a new start in many ways, and I hope I came to a little bit, I pointed to some of the new starts. We are moving also to the EU-AU summit, which will take place early 2022, physically, hopefully in Brussels. I think, yes, in Brussels. And what we are looking forward to is to make an investment package. This is what the European Council asked us to do. And that investment package, of course, focuses on the policy priorities that I mentioned and that you mentioned as well. Of course, with youth and with women and with education as cross-cutting issues, and with a focus on the fragile countries. So with that, I give it back to you. I hope I gave you a good overview of what DG International Partnerships does, and how we have made a new start. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandra. At least it's really refreshing when I hear that the new start is anchored in co-creation, coordination, or better coordination, and of course a new budget, which has to go there. But you said something very important, is transparency and scrutiny. This is essential for any action that is done anywhere. And I think we are needing more accountability, particularly to account for the citizens everywhere where they are, in Africa or also in the European Union. Now, of course, you mentioned a global recovery. Of course, global recovery has many uncertain aspects to it, and we can still see it. So, of course, we are hoping that the macroeconomic scenario is still benign, so where the interest rates are low, and we continue into really moving out from this distressed situation globally. But yes, I absolutely agree with you about the debt relief. But again, there is a whole debate now between the low-income countries and middle-income countries. So to what extent also middle-income countries, they will have to get into this debt relief dynamic. And you also mentioned the private sector, which I absolutely agree. Still, the private sector is in a way reluctant to get into this process because of the complication of the whole process of debt relief and restructuring, and especially for countries who are already financing themselves in the market. The vaccines, I agree with you, but then if we look at the data in Africa, Sandra, they are going very slow on the vaccination process. It is also hampered by big problems on the logistics, on the distribution also of the vaccine. And I think this is going to be a big challenge going forward. Yes, I hear that this is a new start, but this is going to be a new bumpy start because of the COVID-19 and other, I would say, structural legacy issues, which in reality, they are hampering the recovery to go faster. Now, I'd like to go straight to Maria. Maria, you are the EIB, so tell us, please, what you have been on the ground suffering from. Please.
Thank you very much. I was listening to Sandra and I was thinking, you're going to hear from me more or less the same words, probably with a different music, because it's going to be a bit more financial type of music, but it's really very, very, very much aligned. You will see. So let me tell you, you asked me to reflect and to explain about the role of the EIB and also how we see things changing and how our role will change in the context of this current multi-annual financial framework, because it started already in January. And in terms of what's the role of the EIB, we are the Bank of the EU. I think this is really what is going to define everything. It is the defining element because our mission comes from the Treaty of Rome. So we were created when the rest of the European Union institutions were created. At the time, it was not even the European Union as such. And already since 1963, EU member states decided that the EIB should have an external dimension, that we should be working outside the Union. At the time, it was in the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific region. And then in the neighborhood, so in the southern neighborhood, which is the topic of today as well, we have been active for more than 40 years. So it is because the EU member states have wanted the EIB to be active in these regions, that we have been deploying our activity. And this activity has been following the different mandates that we were receiving from EU member states and from the European Commission. In particular, last year, and last year was a tough year for everyone. It was very tough in Africa. We achieved record lending levels in Africa, in the continent. And this was more than 5 billion euro of lending, half of which was for the private sector. And let me explain that 5 billion euro of lending of the EIB means that we mobilized between 12 and 15 billion euro of investments, because we always co-finance with somebody else. There is always much more, because we never finance more than 50% of the project costs. And interestingly, 70% of these investments, in particular the ones in sub-Saharan Africa, are set to benefit least developed countries and fragile states. So things are changing even on this. We were given the policy priority of concentrating in fragile states and least developed countries, and this is happening already. But let me come back to what it means to be the EU bank. The first thing is that we only have EU member states and the European Commission in our governance, and that we follow EU priorities and the policy priorities, but also the political priorities. And this is important at times where other MDBs maybe are subject to pressures of, because they have China in their shareholding, for example. We don't have that. So we know what it is that we are standing for, and therefore, these pressures to support Chinese contractors in public procurement, it is not for the EIB. Being the EU bank also means that we work with EU values, and that our vision for development is the same as the one of the European Union. And therefore, what Sandra has just been explaining, it's about a sustainable and an inclusive development. And here, let me be specific about a number of points. The first one would be our gender focus. It is right now top priority for European Union member states that the activities that the EU is carrying out outside are taking into consideration the gender angle into all our activities. You will have read that in NDG, in Global Europe, 80% of the activities need to have a gender angle. It's even higher than the percentage that has been set for climate. And this is something that we have completely interiorized. We are applying best practices with regard to gender, delivering on SDG 5 and empowering women and girls. And this both on economic empowerment, but also with regard to access to services and to assets. So it's not just about access to finance, which is already a major thing. If you're a woman and you're an entrepreneur in sub-Saharan Africa, your capacity, your ability to have access to the restricted finance that is available is going to be much more difficult than that of a man. But it's about equitable access to financing, to resources. It's about removing barriers for women, and it's about unlocking their growth potential. And then this is where also girls come in, because it's about making sure that girls have access to education so that they can be actors in the development of their countries and of their environment. So we have mainstreamed gender in all of our operations. And this means that for all of our operations, we're looking at what is the impact on women and girls, and how can we make sure that it is a distinctly positive impact for women and girls. But there are more things that it means to be applying EU values. And it is also about the environmental and the social analysis that we carry out in our projects. It's about our views on debt sustainability. Sandra has mentioned this as well. And it's about our views on the respect of human rights. Here, I just want to mention that this week we have launched a public consultation on the review of the EIB's environmental and social standards. So we will very much look forward to inputs from practitioners, from beneficiaries, from civil society, from the countries that we are serving, but also from European Union citizens. We want to hear what is expected from the EU Bank on environmental and social standards. And this is then leading to tough choices. And Sandra knows very well, we recently have had a case of a hydropower project in a country in West Africa. I will not say which one it is. It is a very important hydropower plant. It is green energy. It would be the typical project that the EIB would want to be involved in. But this project is going to have major effects on biodiversity, including on protected species, and these effects, unfortunately, cannot be mitigated. It will also have major displacement of population. And we have concerns about the contractor's capacity to handle these matters. Because of all of these reasons, and in coordination with the EU delegation of this country, we have come to the conclusion that this is not the project for the EIB to finance. So these high standards that we are setting for ourselves on environmental and social matters mean that sometimes we find ourselves not wanting to finance specific projects that maybe others will come and finance. Maybe that they will have to apply their rules, but we are going to be applying the highest standards on each one of these aspects. And not only on environment and social, on tough topics like non-compliant jurisdictions. The European Union is taking a particular stance on these topics, and the EU Bank is following this on EU debarment and EU sanctions. And then, this leads to situations like Belarus. And I know Belarus is not in Africa, but it is very recent. And here, in line with the European Council and the other European authorities, the EIB has condemned the actions of the Belarus government with regard to the commercial flight that was diverted. And we have already stopped, since the presidential elections in Belarus, so some time ago, we stopped all our activity in Belarus. And we will continue to maintain this stance in line with the EU policy. This is not something that you're seeing every other multilateral development bank doing, but the EIB is doing it. We're following EU and the actions that the EU is applying. And let me give another example of Africa, and it is in Mali. So in Mali recently, we all know what has happened, and our first reaction was to call the EU delegation and say, what should we do? The EIB has quite a number of projects in Mali. We have originated new ones that we're looking into. How should we react towards this? Because what is important is that there is a unified European action. It would make no sense that the European Commission is going and taking one stance and that the EIB is taking a different one. So this coordinated approach is part of being the EU bank. Also being being the EU bank means that we are the climate bank, because climate is a priority for the European Union. It is a top driver of the policies inside the EU, and climate is global. So it is therefore also a top driver in the activity outside the Union. And we know about the Green Deal for Africa, for example. So here, already at the end of 2019, the EIB board decided to increase the level of climate and environment commitment of the EIB group. This applies inside and outside the European Union. And this increased ambition has far-reaching implications and is changing this house, what we do and how we do it. And this has then been taken shape in what we call the climate roadmap. That is a document that we have published. What does this mean specifically? It means that since the 1st of January 2021, the EIB is acting in full alignment with the Paris Agreement. This means no fossil fuels. It means that each one of our projects is screened against climate risks. It is going to be about being future-proof with regard to climate change, but also making sure that we're not doing any harm. It also means that the other commitment that we have taken is that by 2025, 50% of our financing will be dedicated to climate action and environmental sustainability. This is very high, because it means that the other 50%, which is fully Paris aligned, is what we can use for other activities that are not directly dedicated to mitigation or adaptation to climate change. And here would come the digital efforts that we are financing, access to finance for small and medium-sized enterprises, human capital, health. All of this will be in the other 50%, because 50% of our activity is going to be directly dedicated to climate action and environmental sustainability. And the third commitment that we took is that by 2030, 1 trillion euro will have been financed for investments in climate action and environmental sustainability by the EIB. This is a huge amount, and this requires that we start already today. And the fourth element that I wanted to share with you about what it means to be the EU bank is that Team Europe comes natural to us. In a way, we were Team Europe before the concept of Team Europe was created. For us, the blue flag with the yellow stars is our flag, and we feel motivated by giving visibility to whatever the EIB is doing as part of this Team Europe activity. But let me come to more specifics. What does Paris alignment mean for us in terms of operations? It's about choices that we have to be making. It means that everything we do, our activities, what we do with our buildings, what we do with regard to traveling, what we do with our treasury, and what we do with all our operations has to be aligned with the objectives and principles of the Paris Agreement. And this means that we have to be in line with achieving the target of global warming remaining well below 2 degrees Celsius. And therefore, that we will only support investments that are consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. So there's a lot of adaptation to climate change within this, and adaptation is essential in Africa, because Africans might not be the cause of climate change, but they're definitely the ones that are suffering it very, very much. And then in terms of examples, it means we will not be financing airport expansions. We will be financing in Africa, in particular, security in airports, and particularly for landlocked countries, but not airport expansion. It also means that we will not be financing fossil fuels in any form. So no gas powered, and I know that gas is in particular because coal, everybody understands better, but gas powered power plants, we will not be financing. We will not be financing gas pipelines. It also means that we will be engaging with each one of the partner countries and discussing with them their nationally determined contributions and how we can help them to achieve these and their national adaptation plans. And these conversations we're having together with the EU delegations. So this point on climate is really driving much of what we do and much of what we are planning to do going forward. Within this, it's a lot about making choices, what we will no longer finance and what we will be prioritizing for finance, but also what kinds of instruments we're going to be using. And here, I want to mention the example of green bonds. I suppose that Christian will come into this as well, because in particular on green bonds, what we want to do is support new issuers so that they issue quality green bonds. And for this, we will be willing to provide technical assistance. I count on Sandra for the budget for this technical assistance, but we would be happy to deploy it. And also the EIB can act as an anchor investor to give confidence to the capital markets. Because using the power of capital markets for green investments in Africa is going to be essential to make a difference at scale, which is what we want to do. And then it also means that we're working on a number of private sector initiatives. I like in particular Renew Africa, because in Renew Africa, it is the private sector that came to the financial group, to the EIB and to the European Development Finance institutions and told us, look, we want to work with you. How can we partner? So it was really them that they were shaking us and asking us to become more active. Out of these exchanges that we have had with them, we now have, together with the European Commission in EFSD, so in the External Investment Plan of 2017, a product that is called European Guarantee for Renewable Energy. And this is an extremely valuable product. It's a combination of technical assistance and guarantee capacity. But let me come to the question of what NDICI means for us, NDICI Global Europe, and what it means in terms of the changes that we're seeing. There is two, and again, Sandra has mentioned them. It's all about partnerships, it's all about working together, and it's all about policy first. And in policy first, it's the Commission that is in the center. There's no point of having several parts of the European Union thinking what should be the policy that we should be following. So the European Commission will give us the guidance, and we will work in partnership with others in terms of delivery. It is no longer a donor recipient, and this has been mentioned already. It's no longer about donor recipient relationships. It's about this concept of a mutual commitment of the two partners. It's about creating common expectations about a common future, and it has to be mutually beneficial. Partnerships then means that it has to be done at country level, and therefore the EU delegations need to be there giving us the direction, giving us the guidance of what the priorities have to be. It's also about partnerships amongst the multilateral development banks and with the European bilaterals, the European development finance institutions, and here the big and the small. There is strength in the European Union that we need to be harnessing. And it's not only the very strong EDFIs, it is also with some of the smaller ones. It's about working together and relying on each other. And DG is really making this much easier because of the open access approach. There will be many more actors that can have access to blending, but also to the guarantees of the European Commission. And the European Commission will be in the center setting the policy priorities for all of us. Let me finish with a final section on health and on vaccines that has also been mentioned, because vaccines, I think, is where this concept of policy and partnerships really comes together. And we have the situation that there cannot be prosperity without health. So all the efforts that we have been making over all these years with achieving the Millennium Objectives before and now towards the Sustainable Development Goals, time is ticking. There's many less years left for 2030, and the pandemic came. And it has really pushed countries in Africa back a lot. So we need to address the question of access to vaccines, because without this, they cannot move on. They are going to be stuck. We are looking, as Sandra was saying, forward to a summer, maybe even without having to wear the masks, and they are not having access to this yet. And the solution is a multilateral solution. The solution is COVAX. It is a difficult way, but we have already achieved the existence of COVAX. And here, the European Union had the vision already back in September 2020. And we need to remember that in September 2020, there were no vaccines approved. The first ones were approved at the end of December. By then, the first Team Europe operation directly channeling funds into COVAX was in place. So there it was, the European Commission with the EIB using EFSD funds and EU member states as donors. The European Union was there when the others were not. It was easy for the US to come. Of course, there was also a change of government. But when they came in February and they were making pledges to COVAX, which were, of course, extremely welcome. But by then, we knew there were 3 vaccines approved by WHO. At the time when we committed, when we signed, there were none. But that was the time when COVAX needed to have the funds, the cash, on the table so that they could be making reservations with the manufacturers. The manufacturers could be stepping up their manufacturing capacity and vaccines could be delivered. They started to be delivered at the end of February. Yes, there's not enough. Clearly, there's not enough. And there's still many countries that have not received enough vaccines even to cover their most vulnerable population and their health workers. So much more needs to be done with COVAX. But what COVAX can achieve for African countries, honestly, nobody else can. And this is something that we need to recognize, and therefore we need to keep supporting COVAX. The European Union has done it. In February, President von der Leyen announced a doubling of our contribution to COVAX. And last week, or on the 21st last week at the COVAX event, President von der Leyen also announced an additional operation using EIB's capacities, because we are the bank of the EU. And here we're going to be working, creating links between COVAX and AVAT, because ownership is very important. And AVAT is the African own initiative. So how to create synergies between COVAX and AVAT to achieve that common goal, in this case now aiming at up to 60% of the population in Africa, is essential. But it's not enough. COVAX is not enough. We need to be working on manufacturing capacity, localized manufacturing capacity. Again, there's a Team Europe initiative about this, and the EIB has announced a platform of financiers that is called SHIRA. It's Sustainable Health Industry for Resilience in Africa. And this is about manufacturing, looking at the future. It's not going to be necessarily for this pandemic, but what this pandemic has created is the spotlight on the needs of more manufacturing in Africa, less dependence, less reliance on others. And the last area on health is that we also need to be supporting the governments. And here it is about sovereign loans. And thanks to the EU guarantee, the EIB is lending in Niger, in Benin, in Rwanda, in Angola, and will be lending in other countries. So I'll finish now. I know I've taken a lot of time, but I did want to mention how all of this work in the context of NDC Global Europe is being coordinated with INTPA. It's guided by INTPA, and it is working with the EU delegation so that we have that very country-driven and country ownership that we need. It's about working with the countries. It's about a true partnership, and it is about this spirit of NDC where we are all working within now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. Very comprehensive, very clear. And I have a few questions before I move to Christian, just for clarification for me. You mentioned EIB is a climate bank, of course, overall, and for its external action. Do you have a data on what is your green asset ratio?
What is our
green asset ratio?
So I'm not sure how we would define green asset ratio. What I can tell you is that we apply the EU taxonomy. So in that sense, in terms of EU taxonomy, which is not only about green, we are at a very high level. Last year, I think we were at 39%. So aiming at this 50, we are already at 39% in the activity outside the union. So we are not in a bad place. In fact, because the needs are huge. So what this climate action approach is giving us is a focus. There's many things you can do in Africa, but when you know that there are some specific ones that are the ones you want to do, and when you put technical assistance, capacity building, you help in the creation of the projects, then those are the ones you can be financing, and that's the conversations that we're having with the countries. And let me state again, adaptation is essential. It's about biodiversity and adaptation. It's not only about renewable energy, which is fantastic, but it is not only that. So we are at a high percentage and going higher.
That's very good. A second question linked to this. So normally when you work in the countries, you work with directly with the local banks or directly to the private sector. It means the borrowers. So how do you work, and how are you sure that those banks, for example, local banks, are also applying the climate targets, and how do you deal with that? In fact, to put the question broader, how do you screen your actors when you work in the countries?
Yeah, so we work in both ways. When the project is big enough, when we're talking about more than 10 million euro, we would lend directly. And therefore, there we would do the whole due diligence ourselves, or we are working with a co-financier and we are sharing the tasks. But in those operations, we would be working directly with the private sector, be it European investors in Africa or African-born, African, grown private sector companies. When we're working with smaller amounts, and there is a lot of need for microfinance and for small loans for SMEs, that we would do with local banks, because they have that capillarity capacity. And there, what we do is, in our analysis, we look at what are their environmental and social standards. And the second thing we do is we tend to always accompany our loans with technical assistance for the intermediary, sometimes also for the beneficiaries, but technical assistance for the intermediary, so that we can help them reinforce their capacities on climate analysis, climate risk analysis as well, but also, for example, on gender. We help them to develop gender strategies so that they become actors and activists in this access to finance for women entrepreneurs as well. So it's a combination of technical assistance and the the knowledge that we have of these banks and our analysis of them.
Yes, thank you. Also mentioned COVAX and the synergies between COVAX and AVAT. I think this is very, very key recommendation, and I think should happen. But based on our research, we've seen that there is a serious logistical problem in Africa for the distribution, and this is linked to the weak infrastructure in Africa, particularly how to channel the vaccines to rural areas, to the vulnerable population, and also the difficulties of those vaccines in normal conditions. We know that some of the vaccines, they need very, I would say, specific conditions in terms of the overall heat and all of it. So how do you see this? Isn't it a problem of infrastructure financing rather than really just channeling only the vaccines at the same time, and which makes it more difficult, in fact, to wanting to achieve the objective?
I think there are two different topics. They are very much related, and one does not exclude the other. So first, we need to bring vaccines to them. That's one thing, and that is what is the task of COVAX. So to procure, they use UNICEF, in fact, for procurement, and to bring them to the main port or main airport of the country. That is one task. It's also important to note that COVAX is coordinated with CEPI, with WHO, and with Gavi. And there is a very important role for WHO. So WHO is the one that is looking at the country preparedness. And in fact, and I know quite a lot because I am very involved with COVAX. I am in many of their committees. There has been a lot of controversy about the allocation policy, and some countries were saying, "Why are you not allocating vaccines to us?" And what COVAX was telling them is, because you're not prepared. We cannot send you the vaccines because you're not prepared yet. So this is the technical assistance, and they have put in place, there's a budget for technical assistance to help countries be prepared to use and deploy the vaccines. There is also there quite a lot of finance from the World Bank, from the EIB, and from others to achieve this. And then there are countries that they have to make the choices. And again, here is a question of ownership. They need to make the choices of which vaccines they are ordering. It is clear that not all of them are equipped to order Pfizer or Moderna type of vaccines that need this deep freeze capacity in the countries, and they are aware of it. It's really sad. I've been discussing with the Minister of Health of Uganda, and he was saying, I need to wait for the AstraZeneca ones, or I'm hoping for the Johnson & Johnson ones, because I know I cannot use the other ones. So he was feeling that how the constraints of the country were putting the population in the country at a disadvantage. But it is a reality, and that right now cannot be solved quickly or quickly enough. What we need to make sure is that we are better prepared next time. And for that, we are working with the European Commission and working with some other parts of INTPA, and we are going to make announcements in a few weeks with WHO and the European Commission. So you will hear more about that. I cannot tell you more now, but there's really a need for pandemic preparedness and strengthening of primary healthcare capacities in these countries.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I would like to move straight to Christian. Christian, I think you're representing the private sector. So, and I know that a lot of pressure on the private sector to contribute in this challenging socioeconomic conditions, specifically for all the low and middle income countries. So how do you see this? What have you done? How do you see the recovery, please?
Yeah, thank you, Rym. So I would like to start by asking you a question, Maria and Rym. So, I work in investment management, So we manage investment funds. We also manage pension funds for people who want to retire. So Rym, you're a professor, you have a very good salary. Maria, you earn a very good salary in the public sector in Luxembourg. I hear that taxes are also very low in Luxembourg. So you're making good money. You must be in a happy situation. But we will all retire at one point in time. And then when we retire, we will have less money, So you have very good income today. Maybe you want to save some money with us, for example. I mean, we can manage money for you, and we can invest it on your behalf. And, you can put it in an investment fund. Sandra was very concerned that this was only for the rich. That's not true. You can invest up to 25 euros per month. Yeah. So if you have 25 euros per month, you can open an account and we will invest for you. So I have two options for you. Either you can invest in Africa, but when you invest in Africa today, you're investing, of course, you're investing in a continent with a great future. I mean, Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, its economies have contracted by 2.6% in 2020. The contraction has been led by Zimbabwe, which is down 10%, South Africa, minus 7.1%, but also Gambia, all the other countries, except for Cote d'Ivoire, had negative growth rates in 2020. But, sub-Saharan Africa has had great growth rates over the last decade, and they will grow again. They will grow 3.5% most likely this year, led by, many countries. I mean, we're going to have Uganda growing more than 5% this year. Even Zambia, because of the rise in copper prices, will grow by more than 3%. So you can invest in Africa. It's a continent that is growing very nicely. There's a very vibrant private sector. But unfortunately, you would be investing at a point in time when the official sector is telling all of us that they want debt relief. So when you put your money with us, your money, you give it to me to invest it on your behalf. Tomorrow, you may have to forego maybe half of what you invested, Maria. It may be gone. And by the way, the official sector is telling us that there will be debt relief without consultation with the private sector, that the sustainability assessment will be done under the common framework and the DSSI without any consultation with the private sector. They will just impose it. And by the way, contrary to what we heard from Sandra, the official sector is not offering any debt relief. The only thing they're offering is debt service suspension. So they will suspend interest payments for 1 or 2 years, and then they want every single cent back with interest. Yeah, so there's zero debt relief, contrary to what Sandra has said. So you can put your money in a little fund. We have a fund here that invests in Africa, but half of that money may be gone tomorrow because there will be debt relief. The other alternative is you could, and the other problem when you invest in Africa is we really don't know what the money will be spent on. So, governance in Africa is very difficult. There's a lot of corruption. The environmental and the social standards are not what we are used to here in Luxembourg, or in the UK. Now, that's one possibility. Money may be gone, but you would be investing in Africa, and we know from the official sector that they want us to invest in Africa. And the other alternative for your retirement would be to invest in some good European companies, such as Kering or Louis Vuitton. They have great ESG standards. They produce luxury goods. They do it with, well-paid labor. They look at gender representation on the boards. And they sell scarves and handbags and nice things to Chinese and to wealthy Africans. And they have an enormous amount of profitability. And if you go to Paris, you can see all the beautiful museums and they're funding there with, artwork that is actually melting away in the sunshine. So what would you do with your money? Rym? It's up to you. You can choose.
You want me to? I don't think I will do either thing. So
you would do it. Okay.
No, I don't. So what I will do, I will invest myself based on my own thinking. That's all.
So you wouldn't invest in Africa?
I would.
Okay. How about you, Maria? Would you invest in Africa under these circumstances?
You know what I would do? I would invest in a fund that invests in private sector in Africa, in well-identified projects where I would expect that my fund manager has checked the environmental and social standards and that they give me assurances about that.
Very
and
good
I
idea,
would be
Maria.
investing in the private sector in Africa.
Very good idea, Maria. But let me tell you, just as a word of warning, yeah, if you invest in a country, and you can see that in Spain, you can see that in Greece and in many other countries, if you destroy the government, yeah, and if the government goes bankrupt, all forms of private sector financial intermediation suffer. Yeah, you could see in Spain what happened when the Spanish government was under pressure during the Eurozone financial crisis. I mean, the economy fell into a recession. No, so you cannot invest in the private sector without a functioning government. Yeah, but that's just a word of warning. Yeah. Yeah. So
I'm not sure I agree. I'm not sure I agree. I understand that the rating would suffer, but not the underlying solvency of those, the underlying value of those investments.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in most countries, I mean, I would say in almost all countries of the world, you have a government yield curve, no? And then you have a corporate yield curve. And the corporate sector tends to pay more than the government. In any country, in the UK, in Spain, anywhere, if you have a choice of investing in the private sector and the government always has lower yields. If you force the government into default, like in Argentina, no, the private sector will go into default as well. Yeah. So what I'm saying here is that we hear a lot of lip service from the official sector that private sector investment in Africa is required. But at the same time, hindrances are being put in the way of the private sector. And I would say hindrances are being put in the way, especially of the regulated European private sector. Because if we do not invest in Africa, China will. And the questions that we're asking, the ESG questions that we're asking, China is not asking. Yeah. So I'm really wondering whether the approach that has been taken here post-COVID is the right approach to help Africa. And I don't want to go down the way of Dambisa Moyo, yeah, and argue that aid, such as the aid provided by the EIB and the European Commission, is not working and is a dead aid for Africa. That would be an exaggeration. But I would say that the tremendous growth that we've seen in Africa, the tremendous improvement of living conditions that we've seen in Africa over the last 15 years, yeah, is not due to aid. Yeah, it is due to a vibrant private sector. Yeah, Africa, has had lost decades ever since the end of European colonialism. Yeah, while it was dependent on official development assistance for decades, that was lost decades that were sort of a feast, yeah, for small elites, yeah, and misery for the population. And that has only changed once the vibrant private sector started to evolve in Africa. Yeah. So I personally I'm a fan of private sector financial intermediation. So anyway, looking at sort of the future, we're in a situation here where the situation in Africa has been extremely difficult. Yeah. I mean, just on a human level, if you look at Kenya, more than 40% of children have not been going to school for a year. A lot of people who are dependent on services to fund their livelihood have not had incomes. They've been suffering from infection. We've seen that social conditions have deteriorated a lot in those countries. We see that the official sector has provided some help. There's been emergent disbursements from the IMF's RFI and RFC to Namibia, to South Sudan, and to 34 countries in Africa that have been receiving some emergency funding. But the question really is, how do we get Africa to work again? And frankly, the question for me as somebody from the financial services is, how do we get in our world money to flow where it is needed? Yeah, we have scarcity of capital in Africa. and we have a vibrant private sector, and because of that, yields are high. And at the same time, in Luxembourg, yields are negative. Yeah, in the UK, yields are 0. So we have an abundance and too much capital, negative real interest rates in advanced economies, and we have scarcity of capital in Africa. And we need to find a way to channel money where it is most productive. Yeah, and that happens to be in emerging economies. Yeah. So I think there are two ways of going about this. I mean, one way would be to continue as we are today, and a consequence of that will be a withdrawal of the private sector, a further withdrawal of private sector cross-border financial intermediation with Africa, and we will leave it to the EIB, yeah, and to official development assistance, as in the past, yeah, and to the Chinese. Yeah, that's one road, and I have great faith in what the EIB does, and I also think that Sandra is doing a tremendous job at the European Commission. So there are a lot of good projects will be funded with the help of the EIB and with the help of the European Commission. But if we do not want to go down the road of state capitalism, yeah, where the state banks are really running the show, it will mean that there will be less money available for Africa. And by the way, even if Europe does not provide the money, the Chinese will. Yeah. And the other way would be a way which facilitates private sector financial intermediation with Africa. Yeah. Now that is a way that will not happen without debt relief for countries that are over indebted. Zambia, for example, needs debt relief. Ethiopia, I'm less sure, yeah, but some other countries in Africa will certainly need, Congo Brazzaville will need debt relief. No, so some countries in Africa will certainly need debt relief. Now, the question for me is how can you sort of restart private sector financial intermediation with Africa? And if I look at the funding costs of emerging markets today, we can see a clear divergence. We can see normal countries, yeah, such as whatever. I mean, some of these, Peru, for example, yeah, or normal emerging market countries. And then we see countries that are eligible for DSSI, Debt Service Suspension Initiative, and countries that are eligible for the Common Framework. And if you look at the risk premia of those countries, we see a clear divergence. Any country that is eligible for DSSI that has been named by the World Bank and the IMF as being DSSI eligible has seen a jump in its borrowing costs. Yeah. So all the initiative has done so far is hinder access to funding for those countries that need it most. Yeah. I think it's quite unfortunate. Anyway, so I think what can be done to move forward here and to re-engage the public sector and to convince people like Rym to invest in Africa who would not do that either, Maria. So I have one or two proposals here. One of them would be to say, let's say we have a country that needs debt relief, yeah, and let's assume that the two of you, because of imprudence or courage, yeah, have put your money. Let me ask you that question, Maria. Let's assume that you put your money into an investment fund that invests in Africa, and you task the fund manager. It's your retirement savings, so you have some money in your retirement, so you task the fund manager with the fiduciary responsibility to manage that money on your behalf, and now that fund manager has been approached by some people in the official sector who turn to him and say, Christian, we want you to grant voluntary debt relief to an African country, yeah, which means foregoing 45 to 50% of your investments on a voluntary basis. Yeah, you're not forced. Yeah. Maria, would you want me to do this on your behalf, or would you sue me for having violated my fiduciary responsibilities?
You know what I would ask you? How much of that debt of that country is commercial debt already? Because somehow in the past, it looks as if now there is a problem to solve. There is a problem to solve. But part of the creation of that problem has been the issuances of these countries in the international markets.
Very good.
And not only then, still this week. I mean, this week, Senegal was issuing bonds. And everybody was coming and running to buy these bonds in Senegal. And the expectation is that there's many other African countries that are behind. So I understand what you say. I really do, and I understand the argument that you're making. But the private sector was happy to take those high yields in the past, and then comes and says, and now they are over indebted, and now you're asking me for the cuts, the haircuts, which is the same that has happened in many other countries, also in the European Union. But sorry, I let you continue.
Yeah, no, I mean, I personally think that, whenever a country is over indebted, the private sector should offer a haircut, yeah, and it should not ask to be bailed out. It is unacceptable to ask to be bailed out by the official sector, yeah, and no official sector money should be used to bail out the private sector. If there is an over indebtedness, there needs to be a haircut. Yeah. That is not only my position, that's the position of most people in the private sector, and you've seen Argentina, Greece, Ecuador. I mean, all of those countries got big debt relief, a relatively fast debt relief. Yeah, and in the case of Zambia, there will also be debt relief. In the case of Mozambique, there's been debt relief. So whenever there is too much debt, yeah, I think that there should be debt relief. Yeah, I have two reservations. The first one is I have a fiduciary responsibility for those people who, out of courage or in prudence, have invested in Africa. Yeah, and I have to look after their best interests. And I cannot voluntarily give debt relief without any consultation. Yeah, and without having a look at the debt sustainability analysis. Yeah, I cannot. It would be violating my responsibilities. And the second point I would like to say is the approach that the official sector is taking here is a little bit schizophrenic, if you wish, because they're asking at the same time they're asking the private sector to provide generous debt relief, and then they're asking the same private sector to invest in those countries. Yeah, so they say, like, okay, I'm going to kick you, but the next day I want you to come right back. Why should I come back? So I think it has to be a little bit more sensible here. It should be a bit more cooperation, a bit more discussion, involvement. And then I think sensible people can come to a conclusion. So we don't have a lot of time, let me make a proposal here. Yeah. We have two problems in Africa. The first problem is that some countries are over indebted, yeah, and they need debt relief. And it's not straightforward to do debt relief when you have thousands and thousands of bondholders, working for different financial institutions. Yeah, but some countries do need debt relief. And the second problem we have is we have very little control over the use of proceeds. In those countries. Look at Mozambique, yeah, the Ematum transaction, 1.5 billion that was lent to Mozambique to buy tuna boats. 40 million has been used to buy tuna boats. The rest of the money was squandered and stolen, yeah, and it was hidden from the public eye. Once the whole thing emerged, the country went into default and into massive financial crisis. So very little transparency on the use of proceeds. Yeah. So my proposal is the following. Let's say you have a country that needs debt relief. Yeah. What we could do is we could offer a voluntary exchange of the bonds of this country into new bonds, but not into normal new bonds, into SDG bonds. Yeah. Bonds which have a very clear commitment for the use of proceeds in order to meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that have been defined by the United Nations. Yeah. And a clear monitoring of the use of proceeds by an international agency, either the EIB or the European Commission or some organization that is tasked by it. So we do a voluntary swap, yeah, of existing bonds of an over-indebted African country into new bonds, which are SDG-linked bonds, where the issuer commits, yeah, to spend the money on tasks that actually help it attain Sustainable Development Goals. And the new bonds, by the way, have a haircut of, let's say, 30%. So we forego 30% of our claim on the country on a voluntary basis, and in return we get an SDG bond. Yeah, and so how do we do this on a voluntary basis? We do it with a partial guarantee of that new bond by some entity. Yeah, it could be whatever entity. I mean, World Bank, you name it. Like in the Ghana 2030 bond. The Ghana 2030 bond has a partial guarantee from the World Bank. I think that would be a win-win solution, because Africa would get the debt relief that it needs, and at the same time, we would make sure that the money going forward will be used for sensible goals, and there will be monitoring on the use of proceeds. And the official sector would be able to jumpstart the market for SDG bonds in Africa, which otherwise would be difficult to develop. Yeah. That would be my sort of concrete proposal.
Thank you, Christian.
Could I just, sorry,
yes.
Could I add 2 more elements to this?
Yes, please.
So just to say that with a commitment on debt discipline, because what you don't want is to do this and then find yourself again in 3-4 years time in the same situation, because not you, but somebody else has been crazily lending to this country. So debt discipline, and this then requires debt transparency.
Absolutely.
So those 2 elements, discipline and transparency that includes everyone from all around the globe,
including the Chinese.
What would be. So I just thought, I wanted to complement with those 2 points.
And maybe I can add one more point here. To be frank, I am a big fan of investing in Africa, because I think it's a continent that has a great future. Yeah. And compared to Europe, at least it has some growth. Yeah. But I think the form that lending to Africa has taken over the last 20-30 years is probably the worst form of cross-border financial intermediation that you can think of. Because you lend at fixed rates in a foreign currency, to those countries. And you build massive currency mismatches on the balance sheet of that country. Whether it's EIB lending, which happens to be in euros, or private sector lending, which is in dollars or in euros, it's the same thing. You build currency mismatches and you reduce the financial resilience of those countries. So ideally, when you restructure that, you want to move away from this form of financial intermediation. You want to move to a form of financial intermediation which aligns the capacity to pay and the payment obligations. Now, the capacity to pay of private entities and of public entities alike happens to be in local currency, because their income stream is either taxes in local currencies or sales proceeds for a company, which also happen to be denominated in local currency, unless you look at a carbon extracting industry, like whatever, Angola oil or whatever, But if it's a normal company that doesn't do too much to harm our environment and our planet by engaging in extract of oil and carbohydrates, it will have revenues in domestic currency, So lending to a country or to a private entity which has revenues in domestic currency in dollars or in euros is not sane, because you build a currency mismatch which is at the root of most financial crises, as we know from the works of Guillermo Calvo. So, sudden stop. So ideally, when we get out of this crisis, we will have helped develop the domestic bond market and the domestic currency market in Africa. So I think it would be great if there would be more, not only more transparent lending, but also more domestic currency lending to Africa.
So, okay, let's assume your proposal goes forward, Christian. So I would like to ask Maria and Sandra, would you be interested to put this partial guarantee, for example, on a country that is willing to have the swap of their old debt into this SDG type of debt? Maybe Sandra, I start with Sandra.
Do you hear me? Because I was switched off. Can you hear me?
We do.
Yes.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I was kicked out and I just came back in. I must have missed quite a bit. I missed most, I think, of what Mr. Kopf said. Of course, Mr. Kopf knows that the European Commission is not a lender. So if I speak about debt relief, I speak about debt relief which is given by countries that lend, such as Germany. So, but there is, of course, the special drawing rights, of which 33 billion will go to African countries. That's one thing. And of course, the support to the debt service suspension initiative, as well as the common framework of debt treatment beyond that, and the catastrophe containment relief trust. And there we do come in because we contributed 183 million, which helps 23 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So just to say that is all, things that we do. I have then left the meeting because I could not hear anything. So I'm afraid, Rym, that I have not captured what Mr. Kopf proposed. But I'm very sure that Maria has, and that she has an answer to it.
Yeah, you partially answered, so it's
Oh,
fine. Yes.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much. Sorry about that. I don't even dare to put on my camera in case I lose you again.
No, don't worry. So Maria, so would you put the partial
Sandra and I should really do like a double act, because we really
Absolutely
complement each other.
Sorry.
We've tried, Christian. We've tried. So I can tell you, SDG themed bonds. It is a product that the EIB offers. We have been providing technical assistance to a number of issuers for them to issue SDG themed bonds. So not only green bonds are in a way, they are now much more general markets. 12 years ago, it was the beginning of this market. Now there is a good system for green bonds. You probably know the EIB has started issuing SDG themed bonds. And but that's fine. I mean, we can do it. We have the equipment to do this. We have the capacity to measure. But what is important is that others are also issuing SDG themed bonds in Africa. So we have been working with a number of players in Africa. We provided technical assistance. For the moment, they have not issued. And you know why? Because they do not get a pricing differentiation.
But that's not true.
What they see, it's what we're seeing. And the second element, and you mentioned the partial guarantee, that we have also tried. And in fact, when I spoke about green bonds, I said that MTBs like the EIB, we could be anchor investors, because that seems to be a more valued type of contribution that we can make to create confidence. Because when you provide a partial guarantee, you do not get a rating uplift. You get an improvement in the loss given default, but you're not changing the probability of default. And therefore, from a rating point of view, there's no improvement. And what we saw is that from a pricing point of view, there was no improvement. And we need to be additional. We want to make sure that there is a change thanks to our intervention. And if that's not going to be there, we would not do it. And that's why we're looking at anchor investor rather than the partial guarantee. I see that in your case, what we're talking about is sovereigns. So providing a partial guarantee on sovereigns. And I have a bit of a problem with this, because sovereigns are sovereign. They can do whatever they want. They can decide not to pay. They can decide, you were also mentioning currency mismatches, but lending to a sovereign in their own currency, you are really putting yourself in their hands if they want to devaluate the currency. So the EIB, thanks to funds from EU member states, we do lending in local currency, in like 15 sub-Saharan African local currencies. But we lend local currency only to the private sector. So we would lend in local currency to banks for them to on-lend, or for private companies in the telecom sector, for example, whose revenues are going to be in the local currency, so that they can repay to us in local currency synthetically, and like that they don't have this currency mismatch. So there it makes sense to me. With sovereigns, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced yet. But the idea of SDG themed bonds is the way forward. Because there has to be, in the same way that I said debt discipline, there should be use of proceeds discipline. And that's where this could come in.
I think this is a key, use of proceeds. I know that Ghana is now looking to have an SDG bond, sustainable bond as well. The problem is, how do they use those proceeds, and who is monitoring this?
Yeah. But precisely for that, EU taxonomy, that is the answer. And the EU taxonomy is not for the inside the union. It's a global service in a way. The European Union is developing this taxonomy as a service, as a standard that can be used globally. Because there is where you would have the real good. Of course, then the second thing is you need a third-party verifier, an independent verifier.
Exactly. That's a very key point, specifically on those.
But there's more and more of those, of rating agencies that are not of credit risk, that are of use of proceeds.
Mm-hmm.
There's more and more, and the more offer there is, the more there will be of these entities that are willing to do those tasks.
Let me look at the chat, because since there are two chats on the left on my my right side, so I'm looking at the right side. One of the participants is saying that the EU member states could play a coordinated role in making the best use of the new SDR's 650 billion allocation toward low-income African countries. So this is something that could be eventually explored. I see also on the left-hand side of my screen, Karel is asking Christian, I don't know if Christian is still there, what happens if the ESG bond does not work? So when again the money disappears? Okay, yes, I mean, that's a good point. So like the case of Mozambique, it's possible. I don't know if Christian can answer this. I don't see him on screen anymore. And then, of course, there are issues related to governance in Africa, which probably more technical assistance, more education, more engagement is important also on the EU side. I mean, from Sandra, on the partnership side, I think more investment in technical assistance, state education on the governance side, institutional side, transparency side. I think this is key, and not only on the use of the debt, not only the sovereign debt, but also on the private debt. I mean, so trying really to explain what is the best or what is the optimal debt structure in a company or overall. I think this is important. Now there is one question, which it's the first question we had at this panel, whether the EU has the power to regulate arms sales to the Mediterranean and Africa. I don't know who can answer to this.
Well, yeah, Rym, I can maybe help you out with a couple of things. And I just, if I may, I hope you can hear me, because I'm seeing in the chat as well. And that's what we started out saying, we know that. And your second question, can Africa be able to produce, and can we help with it? Yes, of course. And we just had the Global Health Summit in Rome, where President von der Leyen made a commitment, a €1 billion commitment to vaccine production, vaccine manufacturing in Africa. And there's a couple of hubs that we're looking into, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of issues, regulatory issues, or skills and people that need to be trained in education. South Africa, Rwanda are all places where we're looking at, and I think that Maria addressed this as well. So I just wanted to take that to Rui. On the question of Flavio, how can we make best use? I mean, the 650 billion is worldwide. Africa is 33 billion of the special drawing rights. But yes, of course, again, by putting policy first and by making sure that these investments are going into green, sustainable investments. And I am completely in agreement with Maria that should exclude anything that is based on fossil fuels. And we fully are aligned in that with the EIB. And that is what the EU member states have actually committed themselves to. So that is already a commitment from the 27
maybe
member states.
Sandra, maybe you need to switch off the camera.
Just and a digital global recovery. Okay, so that's for Flavio and for Rui.
Thank you, Sandra. So, Maria, would you like to add any last comments based on the chat on both sides of the screen?
You're on mute, Maria.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm gone again, I think.
Between the technical problems and the inaptitude, sorry, I wanted to come back on this SDR's point, because I find that it is a major opportunity, this new special drawing rights of the IMF that are expected to be issued. And yes, it's true that for Africa is 33 billion. For Sub-Saharan Africa, it's only 24 of these billions. So it is, for them, what is allocated to them is not much. It's a lot of money, but it's not much. What is important is, and this is, one of those days that you feel particularly proud to be European, is that there is several European Union member states that have said there needs to be a reallocation of SDRs. So there is the SDRs that will be allocated for each country depending on their participation in IMF, but then beyond this, those that need it less should be reallocating to those that need it more. And here I'm talking about not only low-income countries, but also middle-income countries in some of the cases. And that then, again, with a purpose. So it has to be for vaccines, or it has to be for sustainable development goals, for climate action. So it has to be a purpose-driven type of reallocation. But such a reallocation could go a long way to try to address the big consequences of the economic crisis out of the pandemic in these countries. So that's the one I thought was their big opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Now, Christian, last word for this panel today?
Yeah. So first I wanted to say to Maria, these SDG bonds are already being issued. One that I might like most is the Banque West-Africaine de Développement. They've issued an SDG bond under their new sustainable bond framework, which invests, amongst other things, in women empowerment in Mali and SMEs and so forth. There are very strict use of proceeds monitoring in this bond. It was issued at mid-swaps plus 300, and we were one of the anchor investors. So there is already this kind of investment. And frankly, I think it's a good thing. I think these bonds are good. I mean, and Senegal, to be clear, we bought Senegal, yeah. And I think there is I'm very happy to hear that the EIB is investing in Senegal. Yeah, I think it's good that the EIB does it. I'm also happy to hear that Sandra is providing aid to Senegal. I also think that there is a place for the private sector in Senegal. I don't know if you would agree with that, Maria, but I think that it makes sense also to have, what makes us, one of the things that distinguishes us as Europeans from the Chinese, for example, is that our prosperity is built on the private sector. And I think that we have a move towards state capitalism and authoritarian governments everywhere in the world. Yeah, and Europe is different in that respect. And I think that that is also something that, in the interaction with Africa, we should continue to cherish. And then maybe one last thought on this ESG issue. So the European Union has put into place the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which from 2022 onwards will require all financial advisors across the European Union to inquire about the sustainability preference of their clients when advising them on financial investments. And we've done some tests on that, and turns out that 60-70% of our clients, of our retail clients, will want to invest in sustainable products only, even if it means less yield, less return. And also, 80% of our institutional investors want to do sustainable investments. My big fear, is that as Europe moves towards an integration of ESG factors in investment management, Africa is left out. My big fear is that this will actually lead to a withdrawal of financial intermediation from Africa, because it does not meet the stringent, taxonomy criteria. And I'm not saying that we should be investing in coal power plants in Africa, no. But I think that there is a very clear correlation between per capita income and ESG factors. If you do any ESG scoring, you will find that 80% of the cross-country variation can be explained by per capita income. And if you just assign ESG scores to all private and public entities, we will all end up investing in Norway and Switzerland and withholding capital from Africa, and that would be a big shame. Yeah. And I think there are a number of African countries such as Senegal or Ghana, which, given their level of economic development, have gone at great length to take into account, environmental, social, and government aspects. Other countries such as Nigeria, which are relatively prosperous by African standards, are way behind there. And I think we have to take a very differentiated approach in applying ESG factors to investments in Africa.
Thank you very much, all. I think this was a very interesting discussion on. I think it's a first discussion, because I agree that we've been talking to each other in a certain manner. So next time probably we need to have actors from the continent, from African Union side. And I think for me, what I would say I would conclude from this discussion is, first of all, and as Sandra said, it's policy first, not putting money first, policy first. Also enhancing the institutions. I see that one of the comments, it's okay, Africa, it's as a continent, it's richer than Europe, and they still need others to support them in moving into their recovery path. I think this is a matter of institution governance, and this is also was mentioned at the beginning by Karel in the chat. So governance, enhancing the capacities of institutions, also trying to engage as much as possible the leadership in this region, and obviously see that there is still, fortunately, corruption. And I share the view also of Christian. He mentioned this, and we've seen many cases in Africa where the money disappears without any follow-up. So I think these are all very important elements that we need to keep in mind. Also, coherence in the frameworks, in the policy frameworks from the EU level. And I see all these new transition changes institutionally that are happening. It's moving into some more coherence. Probably it will take time to operationalize these new structures. And very importantly, coordination. Coordination between the different institutions. And I see there are a lot of coordination between both Maria and Sandra today. So very good news. So thank you all. And I would like to thank very much the panelists, Maria, Sandra, she left already, Christian. I'm sure we will talk again on this same topic, and hopefully I see you again all in good health. And have a great weekend. And I also would like to thank CEPS colleagues, all the participants who have been following us, and then everybody who has followed us and maybe will watch this video again. Thank you all, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rym. Thank you, Christian.
Thanks.